That's Old Faithful Geyser just after an eruption. That over there is Old Faithful Lodge. And today I'm going to be taking you on a virtual Yellowstone tour of what I call the lower loop of geysers on Geyser Hill. Off to my left, just before I turn right, is a trail that leads past Blue Star Spring and goes down to the Firehole River. And Blue Star Spring is a really attractive pool, and you may like to take a look at it if you do make it to the Upper Geyser Basin area. This trail over here gives us the opportunity of seeing various different sites in the Upper Geyser Basin. Broadly speaking, there are 3 different trails that we can take from this path that I'm on at the moment, and that on my right is the Firehole River, and we'll shortly be crossing a bridge going over the Firehole River. The Firehole River, as I've mentioned in several of these virtual Yellowstone tours, is a thermal river. In other words, a lot of the water in the Firehole River comes from an overflow of thermal features like geysers erupting and hot springs overflowing. In fact, if you go down to the Midway Geyser Basin to Excelsior Geyser Crater, there is no less than 4,000 gallons of water a minute coming out of Excelsior Geyser Crater into the Firehole River at that point. Where I've just shown you on the right is a trail that goes up to what's called the Old Faithful Observation Point. In fact, you can see some people on my right now. The Old Faithful Observation Point is a bit of a climb, but it takes you to a really unique overlook of Old Faithful Geyser. And you can either continue on that trail from the observation point to see Solitary Geyser, and I'll show you where the Solitary Geyser loop comes out a little later in this virtual Yellowstone tour, or you can just come back down after watching Old Faithful erupt. I think it's pretty obvious that if you are going to go to the observation point, you should really look and see when Old Faithful is going to erupt, so you can time it so you're there just before the start of the window during which Old Faithful may erupt. Now, you saw a moment ago on my left, and there it is over there, a trail, and that will take you, as you've seen in various of our other virtual Yellowstone tours, down towards Geyser Hill and Grand Geyser and Vent Geyser and Turban Geyser, and then over the river to Giant Geyser and Bijou Geyser, and it eventually meets up with the main trail between Old Faithful and Morning Glory at Grotto Geyser. And that point is also where this little loop that we're on at the moment is going to come out. I just love these various dead trees in Yellowstone, and I've often said that somebody should bring out a book on the dead trees in Yellowstone. They've got the most wonderful shapes. Let's take a look at where we are at the moment. If you go to the following of our sites, westyellowstonelodge.com/map, that's westyellowstonelodge.com/map, and I'm going to drop in a couple of maps over here so you can get a better idea of where I am at the moment and where this virtual Yellowstone tour is taking us. You'll notice from the map that Old Faithful and the Upper Geyser Basin are on the lower left corner or the southwest corner of Yellowstone's lower loop, and this is Infant Geyser. And then on the close-up map, this trail that I'm taking is just next to Geyser Hill, which is off to my right in the southeast corner of the Upper Geyser Basin, as you saw before, not too far from Old Faithful Lodge. And that is distinct from Old Faithful Inn. They are, of course, 2 different buildings, with Old Faithful Inn being the wonderful historic old building. Coming up shortly on my left is going to be one of the park's most wonderful geysers. There it is over there, Giantess Geyser. Giantess is a fountain geyser. You know, there's 2 different sorts of geysers, fountain geysers and cone geysers. Cone geysers are the one where the center, and I'll talk more about center later, but where the center has built up to give some shape to the geyser, and therefore give some direction to its water. Giantess Geyser is known for very violent, very fierce eruptions that don't occur very, very frequently. The eruptions generally only occur perhaps in between 4 and 6 times a year, and they're so powerful that the entire area, all the area around it, may shake and vibrate from underground steam explosions just before the initial eruptions occur. I'll get back to these bacteria mats shortly, but I'm filming this in August 2020, and Giantess actually erupted just a few days before I was shooting this video, and it's such a rare occurrence, as I've mentioned to you, that our local Facebook groups were just full of reports of Giantess erupting, and then it erupted again a couple of weeks later. Those bacteria mats that you saw there occur when water flows off, and here is a sign that the Park Service is showing us don't damage the bacteria mats. What happens is that the hot springs are really, really, really hot, as the name suggests, and there's very few living organisms that can survive there. Have a look at that blue one in the background. Blue is going to be the natural color of water anyway, because all the colors are being absorbed except the blue that is being reflected towards us, but well, that's been reflected back into our eyes. But because the water is so hot, there's very few living organisms that can survive there. The organisms that can survive are called thermophiles. And as the water gets further away from the center of the heat, from the very, very hot area, so more and more organisms are able to survive. And because more organisms are able to live there, so the bacteria mats become more and more colorful. And we'll also see this with various hot springs. I've told you before in another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours, and I'll get back to that in a minute, coming up on the right there, which you saw for a moment, is the trail that comes down from Solitary Geyser. I had mentioned to you before that there is another loop that you can take, a higher loop than this one that we're on, also in the Geyser Hill area, and actually on Geyser Hill. And if you look up there, that goes up into the trees, and if you follow that trail, that'll take you to Solitary Geyser. And if you continue past Solitary Geyser in a clockwise direction, you will eventually come to a turnoff where you can go to the Old Faithful observation point, which I mentioned earlier. I was talking about hot springs and Morning Glory pool. Morning Glory is a wonderful example of a pool that's just so incredibly colorful, but unfortunately it's colorful for the wrong reasons, and that is because the hot spring is actually dying. And you'll see signs to that effect when you're at Morning Glory. Now, Morning Glory is at the far end, the north end of the trail between that leads from Old Faithful in to the Morning Glory area. And Morning Glory is dying because there's not enough of a source of heat coming up anymore. So as the pool has got cooler, so more and more organisms, more and more thermophiles, that is the lion group of geysers in the background, and that trail to the right is one that you can see in another of our virtual Yellowstone tours. In fact, if you go to virtualyellowstonetours.com, that's virtualyellowstonetours.com, you can see all of our virtual Yellowstone tours. This is North Goggles Geyser, which is separate from Goggles Spring, which we are looking at over here. And then behind it, as I mentioned before, is the lion group of geysers. I haven't really touched in this virtual Yellowstone tour on what a group of geysers is, but a group of geysers is named after the main geyser in the area. So for example, way down the trail towards Morning Glory, you've got the Daisy group of geysers, and in the Daisy group you've got Daisy itself, you've got Brilliant Pool, you've got Splendid Geyser, and you've got Comet Geyser. And then just down that trail that I showed you a moment ago, and this is Heart Spring, and you can see why it's named Heart Spring. It's such a pretty little spring. The Grand group of geysers consists amongst others of Grand Geyser itself, Vent Geyser, and Turbine Geyser. And for those of you who've seen our virtual Yellowstone tours in our YouTube channel of Grand Geyser, and that in the distance over there is Castle Geyser. Now, I know I'm jumping from story to story, and I'll try and get back to as many of them as I can. But there are 5 what I call main geysers, the big 5 geysers as I like to call them, in the Upper Geyser Basin, and those are the 5 geysers which have their eruption times predicted. You've got Old Faithful, of course, you've got Castle Geyser, which I showed you a moment ago, you've got Grand Geyser, which I was talking about just a moment ago as well, you've got Riverside Geyser, and you've got Daisy Geyser. Now, all of those have their eruption times predicted by the National Park Service, and you can see them, see the predicted eruption times on various apps and websites as well. That's the Firehole River coming back into view again. There are 6 geysers actually that are predicted in all of Yellowstone. So you've got the 5 here at the Upper Geyser Basin. And in addition to those 5, there's just one other geyser that gets predicted, and that gets predicted on a regular basis, that is, and that is Great Fountain Geyser. Great Fountain Geyser is located on Firehole Lake Drive, and I previously mentioned that, broadly speaking, you have 2 different sorts of geysers. You've got the cone geysers, and you've got fountain geysers, and Great Fountain Geyser is a great example of a fountain geyser, as the name obviously says. That's Beehive Geyser coming up on our right. We'll see it again in a minute. And with a fountain geyser, you can see how the eruption of the water is not controlled at all. It's not directed at all. The water gets sprayed all over the place. And talking of water being sprayed all over the place, if you take a look at Beehive Geyser over there, and it's called Beehive because, of course, it looks like a little squat beehive. Beehive's eruption times are not predicted, but it's such a wonderful sight when it goes off. You've got this thin, really high eruption that occurs. And if the wind, is blowing basically, let's see, where would it be, from the northwest, and I know I keep on saying I'll get back to those bacteria mats, but if the wind is coming from the northwest, then the people who are standing close up to Beehive get absolutely drenched. The other thing about Beehive is that it produces such an amazing rainbow. We've got an eruption of Beehive Geyser in our YouTube channel, and take a look at it. I was actually just walking back from Grotto Geyser on my way back to Old Faithful, filming the trail from Grotto Geyser to Old Faithful for this virtual Yellowstone tour series, and I happened to notice Beehive Geyser erupting. I got lucky. And that's how it is with so many of these geysers, where the eruption times are not predicted. That is Anemone Geyser. Anemone Geyser actually consists of 2 geysers. You have got you saw the other one in the background. So I was saying that you do sometimes just get lucky with geysers erupting, as I did with Riverside. And that's one of the beauties of this part of Yellowstone. The Upper Geyser Basin is about 1 square mile. Now, Yellowstone, as you probably know, has just about most of the world's thermal features, and about 150 geysers, no less than 150 geysers, are located in this small 1 mile area. And this is in addition to all the thermal features that you see, the other thermal features, the hot springs, the mud pots, and the fumaroles. There's just so much to see and so much to do in the Upper Geyser Basin, and that was the point of this virtual Yellowstone tour. There is so much more to do here than just watch Old Faithful erupt. Now, we are getting right up to the point where I originally went straight over there at the start of this virtual Yellowstone tour. Thank you so much for joining me on another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. If you enjoy this Yellowstone tour series, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel.